Well, hello. I'm so happy to be here today with my good friend Lisa Reese. Lisa, how are you?
I am doing well. Brenda, how about you?
I'm well, thank you. It's so good to see you.
Same here. Same here.
I first want to congratulate you on your recent retirement from such a distinguished career, 37 years with the federal government. Congratulations
I
to
know it's so hard to believe.
Yeah, I can imagine. No, I can't imagine. I can only imagine, I should say. But yay for us because we now get to benefit from all the wonderful things that you were doing for the government. You can now share them with the world. And I'm excited to have this conversation with you, the first of two, about two things that are near and dear to your heart. And today we'll be focusing on emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious. I know that you have a background in finance, and I'm just curious about what inspired you to turn your focus to leadership and learning and development while you were still within the government system.
Yeah, it's when I look back, at how it happened quite slowly, actually. I remember my first supervisory job. I was 25 years old, and I was way in over my head. I was managing people who were, two generations older than I was.
Yeah.
And but I knew, that I loved it. I knew that I loved, and it wasn't that I loved being the boss. It's that I loved being with a team and leading a team. And, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that a strength is not something maybe you're really good at, it's something you're passionate about. And
Mm.
so I listened carefully that this was my passion. And so as I continued up the government ladder, I kept getting promoted, which was fabulous. And I moved to Washington, D.C. for a while and moved back to Vermont again. But I was always with my teams. And so as I headed up, obviously I was with Legacy Immigration Naturalization Service that transitioned over to Homeland Security. And I started a finance office. I was lead of finance for US Citizenship Immigration Services. And I remember building my team and how exciting it was. I had such bright people, intelligent people working for me. And I was at my happiest when I was helping them, cultivating them. And so as my career continued, I realized leadership is actually transferable. And even though I was head of finance and that was my background, I transitioned to another position that I knew nothing about. And so as I started this new position, I realized the importance of leadership. And I realized that you can have some really great bosses and some really awful bosses. And in my career, I've had both. And the statistics are alarming when you see that 57% of employees leave their job because of their boss. Or let's just talk about disengaged people. I bet you the percentage is huge. And so I understood that the importance of a leader is to be that role model and to cultivate their people. And so that's what I did. I started to develop, and I realized that I could do this as a leadership coach. I wanted to teach others how to lead because I had some good success. But I also, while I had some luck on my side, I also did my homework. I went to school. I went back to school and took classes and became certified as a coach. And so in 2015, I transitioned and I actually kind of created my job. I transitioned it from, being the head of overseeing the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, which is the largest employee survey of federal employees. And I kind of morphed it into becoming a leadership coach. And I kept calling myself, I'm a leadership coach. And the more I did that, the more people started to take some classes and I started to teach people and started to build out leadership development. And now I'm a certified coach and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, yeah. And I know personally that it's something that it's like your air. I think of the early conversations we had about coaching and development, and it just you light up when you talk about it. So the authenticity is really powerful. I just want to share that with you and with the people who are listening in. And so I'm just curious. when you reflect on your leadership experience and all of the leaders that you have interacted with over the years, what
Mhm.
characteristics do you think are most important for leadership and why?
Yeah. Well, that has also evolved too. Because back in the 80s when I started, it was all about competency. And it was about if we tend to hire technical leaders.
Hmm.
And so what happens, and especially in government, is that if you're the smart person in the room and you're politically connected or you have good political savvy, you tend to be promoted. And so I realized that yes, that's an important competency, but what allows an organization to thrive and to reach its goals? And the qualities, yes, technical is always going to be important, right? You don't hire stupid people, you hire the best. But we have to realize that there are other qualities. And I think what brought this home to me the most is I was at this conference and it was with elite coaches and OD professionals. And we were talking about what is the qualities you most admire in leaders. So they gave us sticky notes and they said, write down one quality per note. And I want you to just list as many qualities of those people you admire. So we all got busy doing it and we all had different colored sticky notes. And he said, okay, now I want you to walk up to this board. And on this board, I want you to put those things you consider hard skills. And on this board, I want you to put things that are considered soft skills. And when we all sat down, I think it was this aha moment where 80% of the stickies were on the soft skills. And so, as I've morphed into becoming a leadership coach, and as myself, what I've worked on, I recognize that those most important qualities are empathy and caring and kindness, humanity, courageousness, um, connection with people. It's this human connection. And also that a leader needs to continually learn. I can't tell you how many leaders I meet who they did their masters or they did their, I went to the JFK School of Business and I'm good, or government business, I'm good. And they don't grow. And what happens is we hire people from grad school who can run circles around us because they've taken all these leadership classes. So it's really important that our leaders role model growth mindset and just continually learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't help but think of the generational divide. We hear about the five generations trying to coexist in the
Mm,
workforce, and I think of my contemporaries, baby boomers, who really did come up. We did come up of a time that leadership was really command and control, very
mhm.
heavy-handed, top down, and the younger generation has availed themselves of other, you know,
Yes.
concepts and ideas and methodologies, if you will, around leadership, and it doesn't always work out so well. So we have to
Yeah.
all be open to continuous and lifelong learning.
Yeah, and they're not going to stick around either, Brenda. I mean, their loyalty, there's not that loyalty. Like I'm 37 years in government, that's kind of unheard of nowadays.
Right.
And so if you're not willing to change and evolve, the workforce, especially the young workforce, is not going to want to stay.
We have no pipeline. Right. Absolutely.
Exactly. Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect segue into the topic du jour, which is emotional intelligence. Why is it so important for
Oh
leadership?
boy. I do so many leadership classes and I teach all different kinds of tools and frameworks. And I can't help but notice it also always goes back to emotional intelligence as the foundation. That people, leaders who are emotionally intelligent, tend to have higher levels of trust in their teams. They're able to reach their goals. They have more collaboration, higher collaboration, more cohesiveness. And that, the T word, the trust, it builds trust. And so for me, it's become something that's absolutely critical in learning it, practicing it, and role modeling it, and building it into your teams and building it into your day to day operation. So for me, it's that important because if you don't, again, trust, as we know, is the foundation of all teams. And without it, forget about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have had so many conversations about emotional intelligence and models and what we'll talk about later, blueprints, and how to teach it and how to learn, opportunities to learn and things like that. So in theory, it's relatively easy to learn,
Mhm.
intellectually process the concepts. Why is
Mhm.
it so difficult to practice?
That's a good question. And, part of why we're here today, we're in these, VUCA times, we call them volatile, uncertain. Um, and it's just this ambiguous time that we're all trying to figure out. And we need it now more than ever. But a lot of people aren't quite sure what that means. A lot of people think if I'm nice, I'm emotionally intelligent. Or if I'm charismatic and positive, I'm emotionally intelligent. And so, because EQ and EI are kind of two different models, a lot of people feel that, well, I've taken the EQ assessments and I'm solid, and therefore I don't need to really learn it anymore because I've shown that I'm good at it. However, when you really look at your emotional intelligence, and we'll talk about that hopefully in a bit, but it can be measured, and that some people do have higher levels of emotional intelligence than others. So, what makes it hard to practice is because if you are leading in times of crisis, because in times of positivity and everybody like you're reaching your goals and sales are good or the employees are happy, it's easy to manage and lead.
Yeah,
But it's when things turn and you're in this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous space that it makes it impossible almost to lead because you're dealing with emotion.
right.
And we know, and if anybody, remembers science class, the amygdala in the back of the brain is, we call it amygdala hijack, where it's fight, flight, freeze, which while we appreciate that keeps us safe and it helps us, with the adrenaline, the cortisol moving out, it also can help us make wrong decisions. And so what we need to do is stop for a moment to engage our prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, to really sit with it to say, what's going on here emotionally? And how do I make the best decisions? And I think that's where we tend to fall down as leaders is that we allow our emotion to take over and we don't let our thinking brain take over. And
Yes.
so when we do that, we can actually make better decisions and it can help us with our own behavior, how we show up as leaders and role models.
Yeah. Before I go on to the next question, I just want to share this insight. As I hear you talking about a person's reaction, yes, okay, I took the assessment. I'm good, right? I got a good score. It's so interesting. I never thought about it this way, Lisa, but it's almost like they're using it's square peg round hole. They're using the same framework, the same container or scaffolding that they use to measure technical competencies, right? Without
Right.
really unpacking it and thinking about what the score means and how they're embodying the information. So,
Right, right.
yeah,
And to deal with emotion takes a lot of skill. And the my co-author and I, David Caruso, we say this frequently when we teach together, that we've met very few people, very few leaders who are able to execute emotional intelligence real time in times of crisis when there's a lot of unpleasant emotion happening. It's
yeah,
very rare that you see that. And when you look at those leaders who can lead in this situation, and I don't want to get too much into the world stage, but
right,
looking at what we're dealing with Zelensky and his role modeling, it is inspiring. It inspires people.
yeah.
So to be that leader in times of crisis,
Yeah, this is like the Super Bowl for emotional intelligence, right?
it is absolutely
Yeah,
the Super Bowl. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, how do we leverage our emotions rather than allowing them to shut us down?
Ha. Well, this is something I've worked on many times, many times, because I recognize some emotions that I don't do well with. I remember, when I'm in meetings, if somebody starts to get angry and starts to or starts to yell or slams their fists down, and I've seen this in meetings, I tend to retreat and I shut down. I stop listening and I just shut down. And some people experience that with tears. When
Yes.
somebody cries and you know that they're in pain, there's very emotional, and you just, again, you feel for them and you don't know what to do. So what I have taught myself and what I teach others is to stay open to all emotion and not to judge it, and instead to get curious. And that's actually part of the emotional intelligence blueprint, is to get curious and to ask questions, and to really get to the root cause rather than assume that it's something that you did. And I have this acronym called QTIP, quit taking it personally. Because what I sometimes think of is when people get very upset, it's like, what did I do? Or what's happening? And I get very, very upset. And so what I've learned to do is I stay open and I breathe. And I say, most likely it's not about you. It could be, but it most likely isn't. And to have the courage to just ask, hey, I see you're upset. What's going on? So for
Yeah.
me, that is the biggest thing we can do, is stay open, listen, get curious, and just be with that person.
Mm, yeah.
And sometimes you can't, sometimes people want to be alone, and you have to respect that. You have to respect it. But for the most part, just by saying, if you when you want to talk about it, or if you want, I'm here. I'm here for you.
Yeah. So this is a perfect segue to talking about the blueprints and mapping emotions and checking my emotions before I check others. I've been doing my homework. I hope you can see that.
You did, yeah.
You mentioned your co-author David Caruso. This is a perfect time. I'm going to show my tattered, well used copy of your book, A Leader's Guide to Solving Problems with Emotional Intelligence, and this wonderful series that you and David Caruso have put together. David Caruso being one of the early developers of emotional intelligence, even
Yeah.
before the 90s. So talk to us about the blueprints, please, and
Yeah.
what you're doing with the book and the trainings.
Yeah, so it's been, quite an evolution, and I think it's important to give people maybe a little background about where emotional intelligence came from in the first place.
Yeah.
Because when David and I do these presentations, a lot of people make the assumption that EI started, or EQ, with Daniel Goleman in 1995, where he wrote this hugely, wildly popular book on emotional intelligence. And what he based his work on was the actual paper in the Journal of Psychology that two doctoral students at Yale, Peter Salovey and John Mayer, wrote, that first introduced emotional intelligence as one of the many intelligence, like a social intelligence that we have. And so years later, they joined David Caruso to actually create an instrument to measure somebody's emotional intelligence. And when I was getting my master's in public administration and I was reading leadership books, it kept talking about EI. And I was like, what is this EI thing? What is it? And I have to admit, I'm a little embarrassed that I didn't get on the bandwagon earlier. But when I realized that there was a tool that could measure somebody's, called the Mesquite, the Mayer Salovey Caruso Emotional Intelligence Tool, I said, I want to learn this model. And not only do I want to learn it, I want to bring it back to the government. So I don't know if you know this, Brenda, but I wrote my capstone for my master's on the need for emotional intelligence at the Department of Homeland Security.
No, I did not know that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I wrote it looking at the employee satisfaction surveys and noticing that the leaders' lead metric indices was the lowest, and it was the biggest struggle. And so my passion was, how can I go back and help others learn this? So David and I wrote that book. I said, David, we need to write, a quick book that people can read in an hour. But more importantly, I want to add real life scenarios in the back of the book that will help people with the blueprint. So, what the blueprint is it takes the four abilities of emotional intelligence, which what we did to make it alliterative and more memorable, we changed it into the four M's: mapping your emotion, matching your emotion, what's the meaning of emotion, and moving your emotion. So let me give you, can I use a quick example of
Let's do
what
it.
the,
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
So I read in I don't know if it was a LinkedIn article or another article about returning to the workplace
Mhm.
and how executives are really excited. They can't wait to get back to the workplace. But when they did some polling, they realized that the employees weren't as excited. And so you can imagine as employees come back and these employers, the leaders who think, oh, everybody's going to this. So, what I always encourage people to do is when you know you're dealing with emotion, especially maybe unpleasant emotion that could pop up, be prepared.
Yeah.
Don't be blindsided because I don't know how many meetings you've been in, Brenda, where all of a sudden emotion pops up and the whole meeting takes a right turn, left turn, and you're like, oh my God, what
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah.
So, what I
Yeah.
say to people is prepare. And how you can do this is that you do a blueprint. So, the first thing you start with is what is my objective? What is the outcome, my best outcome I hope for? And so you can imagine a leader, if I'm bringing my employees back, I want engaged, happy employees. I want them to have a nice transition back to the workplace and that they're actually want to come to work and are going to be happy and engaged. So I walk through the four M's and I say mapping emotion. Where's my emotion around this topic? Well, I'm a leader. I'm pretty darn happy. But I know that maybe my employees aren't. So I'm a little anxious. How's this going to go off? But I also have to think about other people's emotions because while I would love it just to be about me, it's also about the other people. So the other people, I would be thinking, if I were in their shoes, what would I be experiencing? Maybe trepidation, maybe fear for coming back after, being shut down for so long, anxiety, maybe a little sadness. I'm losing some freedom or my autonomy or my flexibility. So that's the first part. You have to start with what emotion are you even dealing with? So then the second part is my emotion, and I call it matching your emotion to the task at hand. So we know that fear, anger, trepidation isn't probably the best emotion. What emotions do I hope to see? I want to see maybe contentment, happiness, maybe relief, excitement, passion, whatever. So then you go to the third part, which is meaning. Why do people feel the way they do? And I think that we overlook this the most in emotional intelligence. We want the solution,
Right.
and sometimes getting to the root cause of people's emotions is very can be uncomfortable
Mm.
because you have to know, is it what's causing you to feel this way? So
Mhm.
can we get the meaning of why do you feel this way? And again, that's where staying open to emotion is really important and being curious and asking questions.
Without
And
judgment.
without, oh boy, that's a good one. Thank you. Without judgment. Because you know that a lot of leaders are saying, they're lucky they have a job. They should be thrilled they're coming back. And, they're, no, this is where empathy, kindness, compassion
Yeah.
comes in. But also, the last part is moving your emotion. How do we move their emotion from feeling trepidation or anxiety to, feeling happy? What can you do as a leader to do? And so this is where the brainstorming comes in before you even meet with the people. Like if I'm thinking about this right now, what would I do? I know food, everybody loves food,
I was going to
you
say,
know.
I can tell you what I'm hearing. I was just
What do
talking
you
with
do?
some last week, and they were saying that they're in the process of gradually returning. And by April 1st, the mandate is that everyone be back in the office. So they're getting bagels and coffee in the morning. and not just any coffee. I think it's, Starbucks and whatever, and then cookies in the afternoon. So she said, now they're trying to make us fat, right? But there are no conversations about it. It's just, welcome back and help
Yeah.
yourself. So yeah,
Right.
so
And
exciting.
so I wouldn't just rely on my own self. Like, what should I do? I would ask my employees, like, hey, what would make it easier for you? Maybe it's being more flexible on start times.
Yeah,
Maybe it is. And I know a lot of hybrid actions going on. So there's a lot of ways. But what I tell people about, managing and moving our emotion is that in order to do this, and goes back to the other question about, how do you do it well? How do you practice this emotional intelligence well? And it's really about, you know, understanding your people and understanding yourself and realizing that you're going to make mistakes. So the easiest way to get beyond that is to say, "Hey, I'm sorry. I messed up." And to admit that we're human, but we're trying. And it's really, really important to be able to do that.
I think it's also, we have this myth about management and leadership, that managers and leaders have to have all the answers. And,
Mm,
going back to your reference to VUCA, and I can, invoke adaptive leadership, technical problems versus adaptive problems. We've never been here before. And so
right.
nobody has the answers. We've got to figure it out together, but that does require openness and dialogue
Yeah.
and the things that frighten people, quite frankly. Because I think
Right.
at a particular point, certainly at a particular age and at a particular level of your career, the mindset is, I should know. I should have the answers, right?
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. And so that's a great segue into what our next talk will be about, because it's about how do you now recognize that you need to get curious? What questions are you going to ask? And who are you going to engage in these conversations? Because you can't do it by yourself. And that's where ego comes in, right? I should know I'm the boss, I'm the smartest. But, showing, and, you asked about characteristics of leaders, humility. Oh my goodness. The
Absolutely.
best leaders I know are just humble and they
Yeah.
realize that they don't have all the answers, but
Yeah.
they have incredible empathy and kindness and caring about the teams and the world around them.
And that right there is what makes them the smartest, knowing that they're not the smartest,
Yeah.
acknowledging that they're not the smartest, and that, they need to tap into other resources, and perhaps resources that they might not have considered previously. Just being, as you said, curious and open. Wow.
Yeah. And also, don't be afraid to get training and development and to be bold and say, am I emotionally intelligent? How do I really know? If
Yeah.
your employees are super happy and you're reaching your goals, chances are you're emotionally intelligent. If you're struggling and your employees aren't engaged and they're not happy, chances are you may not be practicing emotional intelligence. And so
Yeah.
there are so many tools, not only the book, but we also created a workbook around it. And it's okay to ask for help and to be coached around it or developed around it. It's like I said in the beginning, it's probably one of the most important skills. And I consider it a hard skill. And research shows it is a hard skill. And
Yeah.
all leaders, everybody needs to develop that.
Yeah. If you get the people part right, amazing things can happen.
Oh, and we'll talk about that next time too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for you've put out quite a challenge to leaders worldwide, right? To really to zoom out and think about this differently, and to do
Yeah.
some real deep introspection about where they are and where they need to be, to really reestablish cohesiveness among their team members, and move forward to what's next.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you so much. And I cannot wait for us to have the second part of this conversation when we talk about appreciative inquiry. So, everyone,
Yeah.
stay tuned for information on that. And at the end of this presentation, we will include the links and information to let people know where they can pick up your book and the workbook. So,
Great. Thank you so much, Brenda. I always love talking to you.
and Lisa, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. All
So long.
right. Bye bye.